what do you remember about the first time we connected?
So I was in college. I was studying at Regis University and was just wandering down Tennyson Street. That's kind of the hangs, and saw the book bar, thought it looked really cool, went inside, and you just happened to be reading one of your poems about Dance for Parkinson's. And you were talking about dancing in the way that I talk about dancing to all my friends. And so it was really cool and exciting. And I just remember coming up to you afterwards and said, hey, like, I feel the same. That is so cool that you're dancing. How did you get into that? And of course, you told me about your niece, Sarah, the founder and artistic director of Art is Action. And I emailed her. She was super welcoming, let me sit in on a class where I got to see the magic, in person. And then the rest is kind of history. After that one class, I was like, yeah, right. Sign me up. How do I do this? I want more. In retrospect now, I'm thinking about that moment at the book bar. And I think it had a pretty big impact on my trajectory because really? I had been wanting to pursue dance, and I was studying social justice at Regis. They don't have a dance program. Uh-huh. And I'm still very much invested in that work, but was feeling extremely cynical from, just learning, just barely scratching the surface of all of the systems in place that, incredibly frustrating and that sort of thing. But at the back of my mind, I kind of always knew that I wanted to dance and had just ruled it out right off the bat because I thought there were these other options. I thought my choices were, company member, that sort of thing, professional ballerina. So I decided to kind of just brush dance to the side. But 2 years in to college, I had this moment of like, man, it's now or never. Like I gotta, if I'm really excited about dance, I should do it. So I transferred to CU after I did a summer intensive with them, and their dance department was just incredible. And there was a lot of focus on dance as more than like making shapes on stage, right? Like it's a feeling, it's an emotion, connection to an audience. It's a way to speak to people and things that you don't have words for, that sort of thing. So yeah, I really found a home there at CU. Right.
So how would you, I think adaptive dance is an official term, right?
Yeah.
How would you define that? Or what terminology would you prefer?
That's a good question, because I would prefer not so much to be changing the term, but to be in a world where we don't have to have a term for adaptive dance. Like dance is a thing that should be accessible to everyone. It's a very instinctual thing and like an obvious thing for me and so many others. So in an ideal world, I would love for that to just not exist. Like we don't need a term for that. That's just part of humans. That's what we do. We dance. But we'll stick with it for now because we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, we aren't in a perfect world yet.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole discussion of disability and handicapped or differently abled has the same kind of quality of, if we did live in a perfect world, these categories would be meaningless. It's just different ways people are human and have to live their lives.
Right.
But because we don't live in that world, we live in a world constructed for such a narrow group of humans, type of humans, that terminology becomes important in order to try to expand the way the world is, not just who gets to dance, but so that it's not unusual. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's a really interesting concept of an inclusive model, which Art is Action is a perfect example of, because it's, the kind of the Venn diagram of people with disabilities, and then people without disabilities or able-bodied people. And then the intersection is where the inclusive model lies. And we have both of those people interacting in the same space, taking the same class. You know, we have no expectations, really. It's, you're doing it for yourself. You're doing this practice for your own body and listening to your own body as the expert, rather than looking to a teacher or, you know, like a piece of choreography that you're trying to mimic perfectly. You know, it's a different setup than that.
Yeah, completely different. There's no expectation even of that you look like. When I watch professional trained dancers, there's always this sense of that clarity. Well, not in every kind of choreography, but most of the time there's a sense of that everybody is supposed to be doing exactly the same thing in exactly the same way. Their feet are all pointed in exactly the right angle. And if you just took pictures of their feet, they should almost be interchangeable. I'm exaggerating a little.
Right.
But, and yeah, you're right. That's never been what we've been about, even close to it. And one of the things I had to get over sort of early on was that that assumption that I should do exactly what Sarah does, and if I can't, what I'm doing is inferior to what she's doing, not just different.
Right.
Or that's not just my body version of that. Like my voice and the way I speak English is different from the way you use your voice and you speak English. And we don't think anything about that.
Right.
But we
do. That's a great dance, metaphor. Right? Yeah. That's it. Yep. I think, gosh, I don't remember what year this would have been, but one of the first Artivist sessions, probably 2016 or 17, that I was a part of, that was really special to me because Sarah had laid out the Artivist rules and expectations and like the language that you use to provide feedback, and whether or not people wanted to receive feedback was a consideration. You know, all these things that being, you know, after studying dance in school where you're literally graded on the way that you move, and then coming into this space where feedback is an offering, but not, you know, like it's asked. You don't just get it automatically. And then the language of, I'm curious about this, I'm wondering about this, rather than, oh, let's change that or let's fix that or slice that out. So just watching that exchange and seeing it with a group of people who, some of them had just started dancing, you know, in their whatever mid 60s and whatever it might have been, you know, and that was really cool to see people providing feedback. And I could tell that every person in the room was just so invested in this thing outside of themselves. And that was just, and I felt so welcomed. I mean, I was just this person, you know, 40 or 30 years younger than everyone, who just kind of rolled in and you all just took me under your wing and was, you know, like, yeah, let's do this. Let's collaborate. You know, it was just unreal.
Yeah. My first experience with Art as Action was actually one year before officially Art as Action began. I was invited to be in a show with a bunch of, you know, Sarah and a bunch of her friends, and they were, I think they were all even still in college. If not, they weren't out very long. And I was, by 30 years, I was the oldest person there, and I felt, even then, felt like welcome, and there was no sense of being condescended to, or you know what I mean? There's
no hierarchy.
No.
Yeah. You're like a founding father then.
I'm a founding father.
You are the founding
Actually,
father.
Sarah and I are the only two who have been in every single Artist Action show from the very beginning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even when there wasn't any kind of feedback that came to mind, people would still voice how special whatever you presented just was and how much they appreciate you being there. And that alone is just, what a cool, comforting environment to make art in.
True. And I don't think the art suffers for
No.
not having been hacked, for people not being attacked,
Right.
being more supported than attacked, which isn't to say people don't ask some hard questions. But
yeah. I mean, every collaboration I've been involved in with Artist Action has meant the world to me. But the one that stood out and kind of popped into my head first was our collaboration with Intro It, and you reading your poem. You had your cane, and this was for liturgy, right? And yeah, I improvised the whole thing each show, and it was a really cool experience as a performer because every show was different, obviously, because it was improvised, but there was almost like I could try being a different character each night. And even though I was listening to the same words, certain things would stick out to me certain nights and that sort of thing. So that was a really special one. And then also having all the dancers on stage, all the performers and dancers on stage with us was really, really cool as well.
Throughout the show.
Right. Yeah. Just on stage and then returning to your spot and still being on stage. And so, yeah, that was kind of challenging the performance, perspective.
It was. Yeah. I really enjoyed that collaboration with you too, because I felt as a poet, when I work with other artists in other mediums, like a musician, say, or a dancer, I don't like to think of the poem and the dance or the music as separate. And things change as a result of that, that it's truly interaction. It's not just you dancing behind me while I read.
I remember that.
I felt your presence so strongly, and the difference each night made a difference in how I was doing what I was doing too.
Ditto. Yeah, I remember feeling your eyes on me and kind of having this push and pull of like, okay, now I'm leading, and now you're leading, and now I'm listening and you're listening. And yeah, that was a really, really fun dynamic to be a part of.
I really like that too.
Yeah.
Enter, hopeless, heavy. Sit, sigh. Inquire, ponder. Withhold judgment. Resist the urge for closure. Linger with your discomfort, your vulnerability, your ambivalence and ambiguity. Allow your deepest perturbations to bubble up to the surface. Ache with a bodily ache for which you cannot account. The pain is the root of us, the umbilical scar, the source of our very first cry. Not the first cry itself, but the absence that was the impulse for the cry.
And that's been a really fun part, in the teaching process with this group, is that I always get feedback, and you tell me when this doesn't feel good on my body, or this isn't working. And that is super exciting for me as a teacher, as a choreographer, as an artist, a dancer, to explore, okay, great, how can we do this differently? How can I try something new and, translate it over to your body?
So I hear you saying something like it increases your curiosity or pushes your curiosity into a different area. So that, and curiosity in creativity, I think, comes largely from, maybe not exclusively, but largely from a kind of curiosity.
Yeah. And I would add too that it becomes like a practice in empathy, which I think is a really huge part of dance. And just hearing, from someone else, like, this is really difficult for me, even though we don't have the same experience with this, just knowing that and like working with that issue and trying to like solve it and then hand it back. It's like a Rubik's Cube, right? Like if, they're stuck on something and they hand it to me and I try and fiddle around with it and hand it back. And, we keep passing it down the line. And that's a really cool conversation that I think results in some incredible, how it feels to be in class. And I think it's an overall much better thing for our bodies to do, not do the same exercises that we see time and time again in dance class. Like, yes, pliés are great if you're training to become a professional ballerina, but if you're looking to slow the progression of your Parkinson's, or if you're looking to just move, but you find it really difficult to move on a daily basis, like, this is such a useful practice. So yeah, not only the artistry, but the kind of empath side of it too.
Having watched you when Sarah's teaching, you often are doing the chair.
Yeah, the
version.
seated movement.
Would you explain a little bit about what it is you're doing and
Sure.
and why and how that sort of fits with what we're talking about here in terms of the insights that gives you, or creativity that sparks in you, or
yeah. So what I'm doing is a seated version of whatever dance Sarah might be doing standing. And so I have my hip bones seated in a chair the whole time, and I try and modify whatever movement that we're working on to a seated position, which can be really fascinating. It's things that get overlooked, I think, in the able-bodied dance world that come up.
Well, as someone who I sort of, in the last couple of years, I've had to shift from standing most of the time to sitting most of the time. And then I had to take a long break from dancing at all. And I noticed as I shifted more to sitting, and Sarah is excellent at suggesting ways and sometimes modeling ways too, but still it comes down to what might that look like? And I have to imagine it and experiment a little bit with it myself. So when I've seen you sitting in the chair, one of the things that has been helpful for me is to be able to see a possibility rather than have to make up myself the possibility of what I can do here too. So the whole kind of modeling, as opposed to instruction, thinking of alternatives or how to reshape a movement to get the intent, the essence, the feeling. But sorry, I can't lift my arm all the way up over my head. So what do I do instead?
Right.
Well, you can do that from the elbow. Of course. I get, it's interesting because on the one hand, when we started our conversation, we were talking about some of the problems with traditional dance, and part of what turned you off from dance in the usual sense there are many things sort of wrong with it in a way, or problematic about it. And yet now I hear you saying that your respect for dance is deep and nearly, dare I say, kind of spiritual, even that
Yeah.
the ritual aspect isn't ritual in the sense of just repeating the same thing over and over again. It's more like, no, I'm enacting something here that is incredibly deeply meaningful and has something to do with the heart and soul of me being a human.
Yeah.
What do you most hope for those of us who come to your class?
Like, I want you to feel like you have the tools to explore this vast world of movement in your body, and recognize that that might not look like what you're seeing from a video or whatever you're using as your resource, but that doesn't take away the value of it. And but also just to have fun and, build a community. And we're all here to just have a good time and be with each other and dance. It's low stakes.
Low stakes.
Yeah.
And yet
it's the world.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think this is a crazy question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there a way that dance can help us live in this time of uncertainty and where plans just seem silly?
Yeah, I certainly think so and hope so. I think I've always said dance has saved me in more ways than I can name. And I don't think it comes from any particular dance class or anything. I think it's just it's a way of reminding myself that I'm here in this body right now, on this earth, in this place with these people at this moment. And it's just a very grounding thing, but it's also like not an escape, but it's an elevated version of yourself. And that's what's so exciting. Nice. is you get to be here right now with everyone, but also be this other thing. And it's part of this bigger thing. I don't know what that is, but it feels good to me. And it's something that I think resonates with a lot of people. And yeah, I'd love to share that with, whoever's interested in the future. So
I like your word elevated, because it also implies at least a measure of sort of transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
That while I'm deeply here, I'm also somewhat transcendent, and
right,
which gives me more kind of space to be here and be who I am here and be how I am here.
Yeah, I think it can be a pretty naturally trauma-informed thing too, a practice, because I think there's definitely spaces in dance that don't have a trauma-informed approach, but our space specifically, we're not asking you to leave your baggage at the door. We're saying, hey, like, life is hard, things get heavy, carry it in, and we'll try and lighten the load a little. And so that's kind of the essence of class, and it means a lot to me. So
well, and in the Parkinson's community, it's funny, I often hear, on the one hand, I can never forget that I have Parkinson's, ever. I mean, it's like forgetting you have an arm. I mean, okay, maybe I'm not totally, I don't know. I can never forget that I have Parkinson's. And yet I also hear and experience that there are times where that is so diminished that somehow I'm elevated, I transcend that. And while I maybe don't forget, it doesn't live with me as I'm not paying as much attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
And for a little while, I can pay attention to something else.
Yeah.
And if that's a distraction, bring it on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's just a distraction, though. I think it's something really profoundly healing and necessary for all of us, not just people with Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, it sure is. It's just such a pleasure to have you more involved now than you've been. And I already see all these wonderful ways you brought so much already to us, and the way you brought yourself into our community and all that. Even it very specifically, the way you honor the practices we've been using in class for 10 years, and yet also fearlessly like, okay, well, here's something else we could do.
Not so fearlessly in my mind, but
yeah, well,
I'm glad it translates that way.
It's fearlessly because you ignore the fear.
That's right.
Yeah. Take care.
Take care. Tell Alice hi.
I will.
Bye,
Bye-bye
Wayne.
now.